we want to talk a little bit about Vivianne Miedema. She made a little bit of history. So that's a little bit of something to celebrate here as well. First to reach 100 goal contributions in the FA WSL, 70 goals and 30 assists for the Dutch international. Huge, right? A name that we always see whenever we're talking about conversations of like the best, right? Currently in the women's soccer landscape.
Yeah, and 100 goals in one league. I mean, that's incredibly, incredibly impressive. It has been done before, but this is a forward. She plays for Arsenal. She's incredibly good. I mean, everyone knows how good she is, but to kind of see her hit this peak of her career and at this point in the season is pretty exciting. I know she was pretty pumped about it, and media around the world was kind of excited about this. I was excited to talk about this and kind of see her do that and celebrate it. And her goals are always so fun, Sandra. That's like the other part. They're not just like right place, right time, tap in goals or like good movement off the ball goals. They're like incredible soccer goals. I just go watch her highlight reels, like Vivianne Miedema highlight goal reel, like fantastic stuff. So huge congrats to her. 100 goals in the WSL. Here's to 100 more. Let's do it.
I mean, look, I'm not going to say it's impossible. But no. I would love to see it. I will say that. I would just love to see it. Yeah, we'll see what the forward for Arsenal has, still left in her, I guess, in her arsenal.
25. Right? She's 25 years old. So plenty of time to get 100 more.
I mean, yeah, easy peasy, right? Like she already got 100 now. She can get 100 in the next, in the next decade. I would love to see it. Some news back stateside that we got to touch on a little bit. Cindy Parlow Cone reelected as U.S. soccer president. Reelection for the next 4 years. Cone was someone who actually was placed in the presidential seat after Carlos Cordeiro stepped down back in March 2020 after kind of his fumbling, right, of the U.S. women's national team discrimination lawsuit. Was formerly vice president, and kind of maybe a full circle our story arc to this re-election process. But it was actually Carlos Cordeiro who ran against Parlow Cone this year and ended up losing in this election process. So congratulations are in order for Cindy Parlow Cone, probably making outside of the whole re-election process, right? And having to go head to head once again with Cordeiro. Probably the most recent headline adjacent to this was her role and her place in that settlement with the United States women's national team.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge, and it's kind of interesting that she only won by 52.9% of the weighted vote. So she didn't really win by a landslide in any means. But leading up to this election, the election is made up of current players, like athlete council, who has a percentage of the vote in who becomes the U.S. soccer president. And across social media, players that are on this athlete council were putting out their support of Cindy Parlow Cone, saying, I'm going to vote for her. This is who I'm going to vote for, making that really public and really verbal and really well known. So this will be, although she's been the president for the last 2 years, this will be her first time elected into this role as president and her first 4-year term, because this will be her first full term that she has, because she did slide in from vice president into the presidential role after former president stepped down. So I'm kind of excited to see what changes. I don't know, knowing that you have 4 years at a role and 4 years to make a change, and frankly, all of the change that she was able to make in just 2 years at the settlement between U.S. soccer and the U.S. women's national team, which most recently has been the most talked about in the U.S. soccer, U.S. women's national team realm of the world. The fact that she was able to kind of close that settlement and draw up a conclusion in just 2 years of that is pretty impressive. We actually got a chance to speak with her along with Poppy Miller on HQ after the settlement came out about kind of what this means for her as a president. And I asked her, I was like, does this help your reelection campaign? And she was pretty honest about it. She was like, I don't do things to get reelected. I do things because they need to be done right now. And it's the right thing to do. If people like it and they want to see more of that, they will reelect her. So now that this has happened, she's been reelected. But that conversation around the settlement is still now drafting a CBA between the men's team, the women's team, and U.S. soccer. But because Cindy Parlow Cone is a former player, she's been involved in the settlement conversations over the last few years. Now she will continue to be involved in those CBA conversations. It almost makes for a bit of continuity for all sides because she's going to carry that through for the next 4 years. But from players' reactions, this is a pretty big win for them. They wanted her. They outwardly said they were going to vote for Cindy Parlow Cone. And Carlos Cordero, he's lost. So now he's kind of out of the picture, at least for the next 4 years.
At least for now, right? Yeah, I think it's important with you noting kind of the voting process there, and that, yes, majority vote, right? But that it wasn't exactly this sort of landslide victory for Parloco, which I felt was probably the more interesting kind of storyline coming out of this election process, right? This whole concept of weighted votes versus unweighted votes, and et cetera. It's an interesting process, to say the least. We'll just sort of sum it up with that kind of word. You know, you sort of wonder where these angles, like where these particular parties, where their votes were lying, and obviously Cindy Parlow Cone got the ones that ended up, you know, equating to the most, you know, towards the end, and that's what ends up mattering, I think, in the most in the long run, especially like you said, Lisa, when there has to be this CBA that has to be negotiated. I think it would have been maybe a little nerve-wracking, to say the least, if she wasn't maybe the president that was still in place to help kind of continue, you know, these back and forth kind of, you know, ratifying and negotiating between this next CBA that has to take place with not just one but two national teams. So I'm sure that's something that we're going to have to continue to pay attention to, you know, when it comes to the national women's soccer team side of things. But in terms of back on the pitch, when we're looking at the news dropping globally, in case you missed it, Manchester City are the 2022 Conti Cup winners. They won by defeating Chelsea 3-1. Love a big rivalry win, right? That ends up in a trophy. You had goals from Carolyn Ware, Ellen White, and Chelsea Sam Kerr getting on the board, but not enough. And it's the fourth time for Man City winning the Conti Cup, coming from behind, actually, because it looked like for a second there that Chelsea was going to make this a difficult day.
Yeah, it did. Sam Kerr getting on the board first, but it was a second half showing for Man City coming up, which is pretty fun. I mean, this is the first domestic trophy of the season. And Man City walks away with the win. This is the fourth time they're winning it. Chelsea, they've won it twice before, looking for that third win and falling short against it. But there was also some momental moments that happened throughout this match. Lucy Bronze, she racked up her 100th Man City appearance for the club. Ellen White, who scored the third goal for City, that was her 30th career City goal, so pretty big for her. And Carolyn Ware, who had a brace in the game, ultimately winning 3-1 over Chelsea. Her second goal of the game was her 10th of the season. And the last three games, Ware has scored 4 goals. So it was pretty fun, pretty exciting to watch. I believe Caroline Ware won the Women of the Match honor after this one. But yes, this was a fun game. It was pretty big win, I think. I mean, I like this rivalry between Chelsea and Man City. And even though like Chelsea got out first and Sam Kerr scored, which not really surprising there, I was impressed with how Man City came back in the second half and they were able to win this one. But yeah, props to City on getting this Conti Cup win.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like it was maybe like the perception of like, you know, score first and hold things down. I know Chelsea was missing a huge presence, right? In the midfield there. They're missing somebody like a Jessing Fleming. They're missing some pretty key role players, and you can make the argument, right, that maybe it wasn't a full strength team. But I mean, you look at Chelsea's roster up and down, and you're just like, there's enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're just like, there's enough. So I mean, congrats to Man City lifting the cup. I mean, for like first one of the year, like you said. So we'll pay attention to a women's Super League and see how things continue to shake out there across the pond.